All right, so what exactly are we doing here today?
Today we're having the first ever historical Garfield Ridge tour, sponsored by the Clear Ridge Historical Society. We're going to see the sites around Garfield Ridge that made the history of Garfield Ridge. It's going to be a bus tour, about three and a half hours, with stops along the way, and hopefully we can touch upon most of the historical items here in this in our great neighborhood here.
And why is knowing the history of your neighborhood important?
Well, you know, it's good to know where you come from. It's you know, a lot of times you drive by a place and you think, why is that there? Or what's the reasoning behind the street name here? Or why is this house situated over here? And it's good to know those things. It helps you understand the neighborhood. It helps you, you know, if you want to move forward and help develop the neighborhood. It helps to know what was there before. So.
All right, and do you give these tours often?
We're going to start this. Like I said, this is our first one. We plan on doing a tour of Clearing on July 29th, Sunday, and another one Garfield Ridge on August 19th on a Sunday. So this is the start of something really big, I hope. As you can see, the turnout is pretty decent on this nice, little bit. Very excited to see the turnout here to our very first Garfield Ridge historical tour. We are the Clear Ridge Historical Society. By we, I mean myself. My name is Rob Batunjak. I also work at the Clearing Library. And joining me today is Ed Kozak, our Vice President, and Bob Russo, one of our Board of Directors. And we have several other people, and we have Paul Wallinga, we have Bruce Beveridge, not the drink, and we have Bob Cott, and we have Diane Johnson, who many of you know, who signed up through her, who couldn't be here today, but we are planning on doing tours like this throughout the summer. We're going to see how this goes. As long as everything goes fine, we're going to proceed. July 29th, Sunday, will be a tour of Clearing, and we're going to do another tour of a repeat of this on August 19th, also a Sunday, all at 1 o'clock. I will put all the advertisements in the papers and such, so everybody will be able to hear about it. So we're going to visit the sites today that tell the history and story of Garfield Ridge, one of the neighborhoods of Chicago. Obviously we can't include every single thing. What I've tried to do is touch on the main historical points. And if you've been to any of our programs, by the way, we do programs at the Clearing Library just about every other month on a Wednesday evenings. But I try to touch on these points and just to give you an idea, a little bit of the chronological history, and it'll explain some of the things you may be wondering about, such as the origins of Archer Avenue, and why this house looks this way, and this church is here, and some of the terms you've heard like Mud Lake and Portage. I'll start to tell you about the Portage in just a moment. Just a few what they call housekeeping things. This is a bus tour. It's the first time we're doing it, so we're not sure exactly how long it's going to last. Probably about 3 to 3.5 hours, hopefully. Although I have noticed a 3-hour tour, like Gilligan's Island. But I did notice some street closures and things, so hopefully that won't delay us any. But you know how Chicago is. We have waters for everybody. They're in a cooler on the bus. And our best efforts have been to schedule a bathroom break halfway through. Although they threw us another curveball with that one, so we will be stopping at St. Camilla's Church, and if anyone needs to use the bathroom, it's going to be about halfway through. We had it scheduled for exactly halfway through, but it didn't work out that way. So we need to hold it till then. So
oh, there's the woods.
And oh, yikes! I forgot. If somebody could help me with this, I have some.
Who's this, Rob?
This is my beautiful wife, Suzanne. She's agreed to help me today.
I want to forget your name.
Yeah. She's a check-in person. Sue is passing out some maps as well as some information about some of our stops. They're tiny little photos. If you're really interested in these photos, let me know. I'll give you a full-size electronic version or print one out for you. We have these in our files at the Clearing Library. It's our Clear Ridge historical files. And if you have any questions or anything to add within reason, please speak up.
We'll try to answer.
Yeah, we'll try to answer best we can or get back to you with an answer. The Chicago Portage. Now, why would we start a tour of the Garfield Ridge neighborhood where we stand now is not even in the city of Chicago? Well, where we stand is a very historic place in Chicago. In fact, the people here at the Portage call it the Plymouth Rock of Chicago. This is where, this is significant because it's the exact site where Joliet Marquette, the gentleman over there in the statue, first set foot in the Chicago area. And had it not been for this area, this portage route that they took, really Chicago wouldn't be where it is. Chicago's always been known as a connector between places, either a railroad hub or a waterway hub. But even back in the 17th century, when Joliet Marquette set foot here in 1673, it provided a link to travel on their way, because before there were highways and airplanes and things, the way you traveled were waterways. Well, we have the Desplaines River right over here, and they would have gotten out of their canoes right over here. There's actually a disused part of Desplaines River over here. They've rerouted it since then, but they would have come out here, carried their canoes along one of two routes, because right in the middle of those two routes was a giant mucky marshy area called Mud Lake, and you can see a map of it over here. It's shaped like a soup ladle. Now Mud Lake stretched from about 52nd Street to about 39th Street, and from about here all the way to 31st and Albany, or Albany Avenue. And to get around this mucky area, some people tried to go through here. It didn't go so well, but so they took the high roads, and there was a portage road on the south side of the Mud Lake and the north side, and they were diagonal routes where they would have carried their canoes and been able to put them in the Chicago River and go on their way to the Great Lakes and out into the ocean. So the diagonal route to the north of us here obviously is Archer Avenue, and the reason Archer is there is because it roughly parallels the South Portage Road. And to the north, a little bit further to the north, is another diagonal road now known as Ogden Avenue. So if you ever wondered why those routes follow the way they do, those diagonal routes, it's mostly because they were the old portage routes that these people would have taken. Now, during the rainy seasons, the best thing about it was they probably didn't even have to portage their canoes, because Mud Lake would have filled up. It was caused by the overflow of the Desplaines River, and they could have canoed right through Mud Lake, right into the Chicago River, and on their way. They didn't even have to get out of their boats, and that was quite a relief for the amount of stuff they would have needed to carry. But even as far back as the 1670s, they were talking about building a canal. Joliet had mentioned it in his journals that if they just built a short canal, we wouldn't have to rely on this Mud Lake sort of thing, because it was kind of, like I said, sometimes it would fill up with water and sometimes it wouldn't, and there would be no need for a portage. So, well, obviously the canal didn't come to be for quite some time. I'll talk about the canal as we drive over it in a few minutes. But the Illinois-Michigan Canal didn't open until 1848, and it was kind of toward the end of the canal building era and didn't last long. But even as far back as then, they were talking about building just a short canal. Now, the area where you stand has been part of the Cook County Forest Preserves for quite some time. It's called the Chicago Portage National Site. It's one of two national sites in the state of Illinois. The other one being the birthplace, or no, it's not the birthplace, the childhood home of Abraham Lincoln. And they have a friends group here called the Friends of the Chicago Portage. You can join if you like. They do some cleanup around here. They pull weeds and they pick up garbage and remove graffiti and stuff like that. And they also run tours here the first Saturday of every month at 10 a.m. They take you on a walking tour around the whole facility. I've been on it. It's very nice. And they also do a once a year what they call Discovery Tour. They take a bus tour from Bridgeport. They follow along the canal and the various waterways, and they bring you back here. It's about a 3-hour tour also, and there's a cost associated with that. But you see advertisements for it in the paper a lot. And there's also a website for the Friends of Chicago Portage if you're up on the internet. This doesn't look like much of a historic site. The city of Chicago is notorious for tearing down a lot of its landmarks, and where we stand, probably exactly where we stand, was the site of the former mayor Long John Wentworth's home. Long John Wentworth began buying property from the canal sales starting in the 1850s all the way until his death in 1888. What he did is, this area out here, before it was part of the city of Chicago, was known as Summit, because Summit is right across the street there. But being an unincorporated area, it was popularly known as Summit. And Long John Wentworth called this his Summit Farm. And eventually he owned 4,700 acres. To give you an idea, it would be all of modern-day Garfield Ridge, all of Clearing, and all of Summit is what he owned. In 1868, he built his farmhouse, where the headquarters of his operation, right here on Archer and Harlem. It was set back from Archer Avenue, faced to the south. Would have been built right about where this building is, and a little bit over here. The address of the originally was Archer and Harlem, and then as streets started to be developed and laid out, the address became 5441 South Harlem, and then it became 5441 South Neva, and as time went on, it changed addresses. Now, like I said, Long John Wentworth was the mayor of Chicago from 1857 until 1861. And this area is also pretty historic too, because it's one of the highest points in the whole area. I've read articles talking about people visiting Long John Wentworth's farm and saying that they could look down upon the downtown of Chicago. And the names of some of the areas around here are due to that. As a result of this Summit, we're at the top. We have there's Ridge, Garfield Ridge, which we'll talk about later. Chicago Ridge and Archer Heights and Ridgeland Avenue, and so those things accentuate, because if you're a landowner, one of the things you're always concerned about is flooding, especially when you're in an area like Chicago is around a lot of waterways. So as the real estate developers started to move in, they really accentuated the highness and the richness of the area. So now Long John Wentworth ran this farm where he raised cattle. He did it more of as a hobby. What he would do is he lived basically in the Sherman Hotel downtown, and he would take the Chicago and Alton Railway, which we're going to see in a little bit. It's not called it anymore. Roughly about north of 51st Street, and he would take the train out here and then bring his guests or himself from there to his farmhouse. Now, I'm sorry.
Archer Avenue was a outcast, my mother used to tell me.
Well, yes, it was the remnant of that Portage road, and then later on they used it as a road to monitor the building of the Illinois-Michigan Canal. And basically, cows, horses were the only things that could travel along there until they probably planked it much later. But his story goes that Long John would sit on his porch and just watch people go by, and even as far back as when he was here, there was still a few Native American things further out to the west, and there was some upheaval with him and some of the Native Americans at the time. Now, eventually, after he died, a farmhand that worked on his farm named Cyrus Parlin took over the house. Now, the Parlin family continued to live in the house until 1968. At which time the house fell into severe disrepair and was demolished in April of 1968. One of the things we want to do in the Historical Society, and we've talked to the owner of the European Chalet here, is maybe put a plaque here or some sort of monument that indicating what was here, because Mr. Wentworth owned quite a bit of land. In fact, he owned a race course, a horse racetrack that sits where McKinley Park sits. It was called the Brighton Trotting Park. He owned the area where U.S. Cellular Field is. He owned a lot of areas out to the south, and of course he owned the entire area here. And we're going to see one monument we have to him, which is Wentworth Park. And of course they named the street after him, Avenue. But we'd like to get some sort of plaque or something here commemorating it. Now, Archer Avenue was also used after the building of the canal. It was also used as a stagecoach route. The stagecoach would bring you down Archer Avenue and follow pretty much the way it goes now and bring you all the way out. I think it all went to Bloomington. It kind of followed where Route 66 went, right, Ed?
Yes. Yes.
But there was a stagecoach stop on Archer and Lawndale. Now Lawndale, not the Lawndale that's to the east, but there's a Lawndale Avenue here in Summit. If you ever ride by there, if you can envision a stagecoach route stop right there. And it was in operation until the 1850s or 1860s maybe. And some famous people such as Daniel Webster were said to have ridden down this stagecoach route. So it's a pretty historic area where we're at right now. It might not look it now because it's been, subdivided. It's been now the Parlin family, like I said, they owned it until 1968, and this corner has been many different things. And of course now it's Walgreens over here, and part of the house would have sat on the Walgreens property, and part of the house on this European chalet. We did a comparison, an aerial view, and kind of half and half on the property. But if we have a lot more information in our files about it, we have some photos of it. I believe, I'm not sure if I included a photo of it there. There is a photo of it. One of the views. We have pictures of various views of it and everything. It's quite fascinating. It's on the list of historic and the National Historic Register, but again, there's nothing much they can do about it now. It's already gone. So, any questions about Mr. Wentworth's property or?
When he lived here, was this part of Chicago?
It was not. It did not become.
Garfield Ridge become Chicago?
Garfield Ridge, well, there's two answers to that. From Cicero Avenue to the west was annexed in 1915. And there's little bits and pieces that were annexed in the 20s, like the Leclerc Courts, former Leclerc Courts area, and parts of Clearing were annexed in 1923. But all of Clearing and Garfield Ridge, for the most part, were annexed in 1915. There is a small part of Garfield Ridge to the east of Cicero that goes to the railroad tracks that was annexed in 1889. Of course, it wasn't known as Garfield Ridge then. We'll talk about the origin of Garfield Ridge, the name and everything in a few minutes. But no, it was not. It was called Summit. In fact, pretty far to the west, we're going to visit a church over on Archer and Mayfield that at one point had the word Summit on top of it. So it was known as Summit as far east as about Austin Avenue or so. But that's just because it was in an unincorporated area, and for lack of a better name, and it was pretty much farmland out here. There isn't much to speak of. We're one of our last stops will be the oldest house in Garfield Ridge still standing. It's 130 years old, and I can't imagine there was much of anything out here at that point, other than the house that was here. It's no longer here. Here we stand at what would be about the southern edge of this mud lake. Mud Lake again was this giant mucky marshy area, really indicative of Chicago. Chicago was basically built on a swamp. But it would have stretched from about 52nd. Okay. About 52nd Street to about 39th Street over here, and it would kind of go diagonally and go all the way to about 51st or 31st and Albany. Now, Mud Lake is sort of this, nickname given to it. If you look on old maps of the area, they'll show Mud Lake with the little ladle design on there, and you'll see it. And you'll see the grove of oak trees that I talked about too on these maps, and it's labeled Point of Oaks. Now, Mud Lake over the years was dried up. it wasn't advertised as Mud Lake. It was just known by the locals as Mud Lake. Now, when they built the canal through the area, which would have been right over the Stevenson Expressway, just to the north of here, it dried up a lot of Mud Lake. And there were a lot of remnants still left here and there. In fact, up until I would say the 70s or so, I've heard stories, right, Bob? You said there was swimming holes and hidden lakes, and I forget the names of all. Hidden lakes and Paradise Pond. And I heard other stories where they call it other things.
As kids, I lived right on 51st and Northern.
Yeah. And you have to imagine those were little remnants, little ponds left over from Mud Lake. Of course, the level of the land is quite different because as the Clearing Industrial District, they call it Clearing Industrial District number 2, started moving in here with the Clorox plant and other plants, they used landfill and they filled in. Back in this area here, in fact, a little bit further to the west of us and a little bit to the north is a little remnant. There's a gentleman named Philip Veerling. He writes a newsletter for the Portage people. And in his newsletter, in one issue, he traced the disappearance of Mud Lake. And he took photos. It's just a fascinating study. And he shows, the original level of it, and then he shows when the landfill was there. But he pinpointed a remnant of it back in the foresty area here. Now, I wouldn't advise going back there because the legality of it, it's owned by the railroads now, or owned by Forest View over here, so enter at your own risk. But what this man did is he took a little vial and he took some water and he calls it authentic Mud Lake water. But I took a trip back there and I climbed over some things, and there's a little pond area, and we have a photo of it where the level of the land is lower, and I like to believe that that's a remnant of what's left of Mud Lake. Ed and I walked back here last week, and really there's not much to see, but it's still kind of undeveloped from this area, and that's why I took you here. As you get further along 51st to the east here, you really don't see anything. It's all been filled in with concrete. And now the Chicago and Alton Railway sits, well, it's not called that anymore, I forget what it's called, but it's right behind us here. And that's how Long John Wentworth would have gotten out to his property. And it was a passenger line that would have taken people out to wherever it goes. Of course, now it's not a passenger line, it's more of a freight line. We have some old Chicago and Alton photos, actually, showing some of the area. And it was quite undeveloped here until about the 30s. That's when the Clearing Industrial District moved in. So like I said, if you ever have the energy and if you're an explorer, there's a little break in the fence a little bit further down here. There's a break in the fence here, but there's also another one. And you can kind of work your way. I would suggest spraying yourself for bugs and things.
And wear long pants.
And wear long pants. And we're not going to go back there. I don't want anybody getting hurt. But this is what is popularly known as Mud Lake. So if any of you, like I said, grew up along the area and remember swimming or skipping stones or anything along the ponds here, they were more than likely remnants of this Mud Lake. So, any questions about Mud Lake? Yeah.
When you were exploring, did you see any wildlife, like beavers or coyotes?
You know what? I've been hearing reports of coyote being spotted in the area.
It was at Kennedy Park on Halloween night. My brother and I were riding around. There was a coyote.
Yeah, so they're reclaiming their area. Between the railroad and the city, the city now owns, well, where we're standing is Forest View, the suburb, but I can't imagine there's much wildlife other than what we see in our yards every day, like raccoon, maybe a possum here and there, and of course rats and bugs and things like that. So.
Park on 59, where you go.
It's a poisonous snake.
The police said they found a coyote.
Over there? Yeah.
I wanted to get out there like Portage one day. Because I saw what I thought was a scary dog, in the shadows by the fence. And it didn't look like a dog fight, And then somebody told me they had seen a coyote in town.
People are alarmed, but I mean, they were there now. The water would drain into the canal now. Because the Mud Lake was formed by the overflow of the Desplaines River. And one of the problems I mentioned that Ogden and Wentworth dug their own little ditch. If you go over in the Stickney side here of
The north side of the
north side
expressway.
here, there is where this canal that they, or not canal, they dug this little ditch. And what happened is all the garbage from Chicago would be flowing down the Chicago River, and it would go into the Desplaines River. The Desplaines River would overflow back into their ditch, back into the Chicago River, and they were blamed for some of the cholera outbreaks in the 1880s and things like that. Because what they did is they actually they almost reversed the flow of the river themselves. And if you read old articles, it's kind of funny, their arguments with the city. In fact, the city built a dam to stop them from doing this. It's called the Ogden Dam. As we passed over the where the Ship and Sanitary Canal is now, right at Harlem, they built a dam. At first they built it out of like wood and things, but they would take some explosives and blow it up. Long John being the man that he was. And later on they built a concrete Ogden Dam, and it existed all the way until they built the Ship and Sanitary Canal. I was gonna, being a hot day, I was gonna schedule an unscheduled dip into the Ship and Sanitary Canal, but I wouldn't advise that. That's kind of the sewer of Chicago, really.
You have to also mention that, back in the 50s, 47th Street never went through to Central. It only went through to Cicero.
My dad talks about,
There was a farmhouse on 47th and Central. It was on the west side of the street, set back a little bit, and it was an actual working farm. And of course, they built a factory there now. And it's all gone.
My dad would talk about walking down, when we grew up in the L streets over there, and he would walk north to right where 47th would be, and then keep going. And there was remnants of the Illinois-Michigan Canal there, and he would take, he would build himself a little, Huck Finish type raft.
Right, Huck Fit raft,
and float down this thing. So there were remnants of the canal quite a ways until they built the Stevenson.